The Gary Perry podcast, take 21. Another one at home. Christos Vardacostas. They say it right?
Very good.
I've been practicing. It's like, I'm going to look up this guy's name and try to pronounce it. Because remember last time, I think you were on the Garrett and Carl show. I just didn't know how to pronounce your name.
Right.
And it's not even that hard.
No,
I just don't care that much to learn people's names.
Yeah. At least it's phonetic, which makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, there's nothing like off-putting about it. Just a regular name.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great to have. I remember you always were really easy to talk to because, I don't know, you must have like the gift of gab or something.
I don't know. I mean, I actually often feel that the times that I've spoken to you before in this forum that I've really often not been, like just when your life's busy, like I feel that, I guess I'm relaxed, but I don't feel I'm necessarily that that conversational. I don't feel like I've been that conversational. Whereas I think that there's, I actually really enjoy having good conversations, so I think maybe it has to do with the formal nature of having a mic in your hand. And so then you're kind of put on the spot to be entertaining and that kind of thing. So I think my favorite activity like that is to be singing, to be performing, which is pretty rare these days.
Yeah, geez, never see you out and about. How is the band going? Phos.
Well, we just played at the Omanika Arts Center a few weeks ago for the first time in 2 years. I think that's the first time we've been out.
Oh, wow. What was the event going on?
It was celebrating their new location. So now they're on Victoria Street, 300 block of Victoria.
Okay.
So it is, for loud music, it's a better location. The sound was pretty good, I thought.
Any other bands play?
Yeah, Red Wind and one other performed there, I believe. And it was also an arts celebration, obviously, because it's a center that's meant to be celebrating all kinds of arts. So there were visual arts, and there might have been, there was probably drumming during the day. So, but I mean, we just kind of came in and said we would show up, for the late session, basically.
Right.
So most people had actually left by the time we were going to play.
So you kind of come in, cigarettes lit and everything, and just rock out.
Basically set a stream of gasoline across the floor and just light it on fire.
Cheap
that's
fire.
Essentially
it's just like, it's just the price of gasoline for our
That's right. Yeah, so of course it wasn't we don't care about getting paid or anything. So it was also a fundraiser for this art center. So I think they raised a few dollars, hopefully, so they can stay alive. But it was just great to play, and I would say. I think it doesn't mean much in terms of the present moment, but each show that we've played, I feel like has been better than the previous incarnation of the band or the previous, where we were the last time we played. And so even though we rarely practice, I just think there's a certain, ability to play songs you've played a million times, even if they're still in a growth stage.
Yeah, it's almost like a muscle memory at that point, I'd think. I wouldn't know for sure.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, provided you really stay in the moment and don't really, again, I really like playing live in front of people, but at the same time, it's important to stay in that, like be in that present moment and be concentrating on the song that you're playing. That's the most important part, so that you perform well and feel it, obviously. So, but I think of it as being the most cathartic activity. Be on a few, stretching yourself to your limits, like physically, emotionally, spiritually, and enjoying it, because most of the time I feel like I'm in this other phase or this other part of my life that's like using different parts of your brain, basically, and doesn't, where that feeling doesn't arise at all. And although there's a lot to be said in terms of the positive outcomes and the what I love inherently about work and about helping people, but in this moment. It's just it feels like a very selfish thing almost. Just to be shedding. It's like a shedding of skin in a moment.
Yeah, before this podcast started, you're telling me a bit about you're putting together a 50 housing development.
Yeah. The Aboriginal Housing Society of Prince George has a new place that we just developed recently with the help of BC Housing and others, and that's called Tsuyo, and it's on Spruce Street. It's 27 units that are for elders and seniors, and that very much is the first development that the society has done in a long time, and it's just this great phase in housing where basically there's it's like people end up saying, oh, housing's so important now, or as important as it's ever been, and it's that same kind of thing. Like when you leave something underfunded for so many years, or where things haven't really hit a breaking point, or it's become so obvious that there's a breaking point, and I guess with political change as well, like the Liberals coming in federally, the kind of recent change in the provincial government, it just makes it's just been this time where more and more funding was being put towards housing, but it's always been important.
Yeah.
I think in many respects, it's an economic problem. It's part of it is an economic problem. It's definitely a cultural problem. It's a problem with our history. So when it comes to the kind of all the communities in this area and how those communities arose, and the role of the federal government, essentially colonizers of the 1800s. It's created this, it's a complete kind of manipulation of people. And today there's an opportunity to help people. There always has been in terms of helping people with housing, but our economy is also like a really fragile thing where we've just kind of gone with the flow more or less, and governments have excuse me, governments put money where they think money should be put to help something bigger occur. So like creating a road where you'd be foresting on both sides of that road, or exploring minerals. That's kind of the recent economy we've created. In many respects, I feel it doesn't go beyond that. Like that's all we've really thought about is where do we put that dollar to help out, give a little push so that an economy takes off. So the whole technology sector, and then even just all the social services we provide between education, health, and cultural services, other types of social services, the services for youth, and kind of the kind of misguidance of that in terms of how you really help families. I just think we're off path, and we've been off path for so long in terms of how a state works that we have to find a way back. And so for me and my work, it's basically helping an organization grow, and helping it grow so that we essentially find a way to have more housing and help more people to the greatest degree. And it's most of it's a technical exercise, in doing that. And so I'm not really overly concerned, or don't even tend to really show that I care in terms of like what I end up saying in the public eye, because I do have, I do end up, reporting to media, or reporting to the community what we're up to and that kind of thing. But it's really rewarding in the end, because the idea is that I'm able to help somehow. Even though I'm not, we have people on the front lines. We're a very small organization, but we're trying to grow our role to be able to do that and provide more housing. And think of it, I guess, going back to what I was saying, as an economic problem. And I guess that whole digression was about the fact that if there isn't economy in the region, people will move to Prince George, to Lheidli-T'enneh territory. And that's what's happening, and that'll keep happening. And it's really important that we understand that, and we understand what the needs are of the people that are coming here. So people need education, people need appropriate education, people need a connection to their culture and their community. And so what role can we play in that? So it's just important to be really thoughtful about how to foster community, especially when somebody's coming from outside of Prince George and might have only lived in one community all their lives. Like, things like that are actually a reality. So, it's important to be pretty humble about how to do that in a way where we're actually listening and find a way to kind of design a neighborhood that is really for the people that are going to be using it. But we need to provide, beyond education, facilitation, just ways of being successful in housing, having all the things to do recreationally, a connection to culture, but a connection to culture in a very broad manner, because we have people coming from, a lot of outside communities within northern BC, plus Métis across Canada. And then, and we also have some people that are not Indigenous within our housing. And then it gets to employment, like how do we connect people to employment opportunities and training opportunities, and how do we connect them to appropriate and accessible health services, health and wellness type services. These are all things we're looking at, but we're not experts in those things. It's just a matter of really being conscious of how do we make connections to those things.
Quite a complicated issue that you've stumbled across here.
Yeah. So that's not rock and roll exactly, but
Mm-hmm.
but that is
But
is a huge part of my world in terms of the things that I'm thinking about every day.
I think about this cat all day.
What's
It's a lot more simpler. My sister named it Bowery.
Bowery.
Apparently, it's an Indian name that means madness, and she's mad.
Nice. Yeah, cats really provide a certain solace. That we just lost our cat. He disappeared, and I think a fox probably got him. Is my guess. Could be. I don't know. Do coyotes catch cats too?
Yeah, probably, but fox would probably be more likely in the city because you do see him around.
Yeah, we're up the hill. We're up like above College Heights, and there is quite a bit of green space around us.
Oh.
And yeah, he was great at birding and catching mice, but yeah, one night he just disappeared months back.
Oh, that's so sad. That's why we decided to keep this cat as an indoor cat. Just let it go insane indoors, just like me.
Yeah, so as long as you can, so if you can relate to the cat, then you can think of ways to help him with his recreation.
Yeah, it was so sad when we first got him because I was just like imagining its life, like it's just born and then like taken away from its mother and its brothers and sisters, and it's just like in this weird new environment. And I got it from my hometown, Kitwanga, so there's a 6-hour journey between there and here, so that must have been a bit traumatizing as well.
So it's a he, did you say, or she?
It's a she.
She. So how old was she when you were traveling with her?
I think I didn't get to travel with her. I just got to meet her here.
Oh, okay.
When it got delivered. Yeah. She was 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I can't remember.
Okay. Because we did. I brought our cat up from Quesnel at the time. I think he was only 4 weeks.
Oh wow!
And so he just traveled in my lap mostly because he was in a box and then he was climbing out of the box, and I basically just drove with him in my lap. Yeah, cats are great.
Mm-hmm. How old was your cat?
He would have been 4 this year.
Oh, that's so sad. Yeah, that was an experience I went through a lot in Kitwanga too. We'd get a new cat every once in a while. Until the cat that they have now, he must be 7 or 8 now. I swear there must have been some sort of animal going around feeding on cats, and then it must have just died off. And this one was really smart.
Right.
But I don't believe that for a second. She's not that smart, doesn't she?
Yeah, there are a lot of predators out there.
Yeah, it's like people feed foxes too, I found out. They're just like little neighborhood pets, and there's no bylaws or nothing against it. Like, you're not allowed to feed bears. That's a big no-no.
Right.
You get in big trouble for that, but you could just feed a fox. No one cares.
Yeah, they're so prevalent in the around town. Like, I remember along that hill above our offices and close to where I used to live, just that ridge between Edmonton Street and down the hill. So that ridge between 15th and 17th, like there was always, as far as I can remember, there was always a fox coming down from there that had his foxhole up the hill somewhere, and would come down and just look for garbage or, be scavenging for food essentially. But I saw, red foxes, black foxes.
Yeah, there's such like a variety of the silver fox too. Back in Kiwanga, I don't remember ever seeing any other fox besides like a typical orange one with like the black tail or whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the, I guess, what kind of vegetation they have, whether they're hanging out, like now would be the perfect time for the red fox, just hanging out in a pile of red leaves, and then jumping out and catching its prey.
That seems like a very small time of the year that'd be okay.
So it's well fed for for a week.
And then it's winter, and then it starves all winter.
Right. I've seen a lot of bears out too,
yeah?
as of late, and I hear a lot of stories. I don't know if it's any different. No, it is different than the last couple of years. I don't remember anything last year or the year before. I've been in my neighborhood for a few years now, and this year in particular, there just seemed to be, we had a bear raiding our garbage back in August, and so there was.
My friend lived up in College Heights, and we were going outside just to like toke up, and there was a bear right there. It was like it was like turned around, bear. Like, what are you talking about? It was like, there's a bear. It's like 4 feet away. It's like where the car should be. That was a little traumatizing. Not quite expecting that. I wouldn't even know what to do.
Yeah,
it's my time to fight the bear.
You shouldn't really do anything.
Yeah,
be respectful of the bear.
Run away, stay inside until it's gone away.
Yeah, I don't think you don't hear about many incidents of altercations in the city. Like more often the bear's just going to run away.
Mm-hmm. It would have to be a pretty desperate situation, I think, for a bear to attack a human in an efforts to eat it.
Yeah, I think so. In most cases, it's. I think it's. I mean, obviously there are. What was that grizzly guy called? Grizzly Man, or the one that
Werner Herzog made a film.
That's right. The one that was traveling between California and Alaska. Like that's you could tell that was a person that really had a different view in terms of their understanding of bears and their relationship with bears.
And it paid the ultimate price too.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean,
it's like a good lesson. It's like, okay, you can't be friends with the bears. Sometimes they get hungry and they do see you as food.
Yeah, so just finding that balance where you can be respectful is important. I wouldn't want to be, hitting a bear on the nose and those kinds of things.
That seems like a defense mechanism. If they're attacking you, like maybe attack it on its nose. It seems like a weak spot for some reason.
Yeah, well, except that if it's just because the bear has walked up close to you, it just seems somehow, I don't know, an inappropriate way to react. So yeah, no, but I was going to say outside of that, I mean, I think that obviously you have to take precautions. If you're going out into the bush and carrying bear spray. And
I guess it was like the early explorers having to kill them. They had to create that relationship with the bears and kill the aggressive ones and make the bears kind of afraid of humans and afraid to get shot so that they would just run away. But they don't really shoot the bears no more. It's more like save the bears.
Have you gone hunting before?
No. I think I might have gone grouse hunting as a kid, but I don't really remember it too well.
Yeah, no, I've been grouse hunting as well. And then I just, I think it's important to know how to hunt for your own food and to have that respect. And
it seems kind of like the hardest part would be just like killing an animal, to me at least. But I understand why. I'd be open to going hunting for something maybe bigger than a grouse, maybe a deer. I don't like deer. There seems to be lots of them, and it seems like it'd be big enough that I could eat it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I do like when I hear about those that honor, that are really conscious of the relationship between humans and animals, and are essentially honoring the animal in a way and doing things respectfully. But
Yeah.
that's
And when they take when it's a part of the ecosystem, when there's too many animals, and just to thin down the herd a bit, like it's humane in a way too. Like it makes it living in the bush for the others a little better,
right.
and it is just a part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, when you think about it regionally, though, like in this area, and you have First Nations, doing hunting and fishing, on their traditional territories. That I mean, that it's interesting there. You really start to see the. It's easy to think about how when you also have trophy hunters coming in with guiders into those same areas, and I hear some occasionally like horrific stories about how those animals are used or not used because they're not there to use the whole animal, for example. So they might leave a carcass and things like that. Those are
it's a sport, right?
yeah, they're brutal things to hear about, but they're also activities that end up drawing down that population. So you end up with animals that are more and more extinct. I think in fishing, it's really obvious to see because we've done all of this populating of the salmon supply, to be like repopulating those waters, and yet, I mean, on the one hand, it's the tough part for me, and I don't think about this stuff that often, but I mean, I think about it in the sense that is that the original salmon, Like if I go back 200 years, is that genetically, are we still talking about the same salmon? And I don't believe we are. I think there's been a lot of repopulating where they've genetically modified the eggs and created a salmon that maybe didn't exist before exactly.
And it doesn't taste as good.
It's that, and is it as resilient in its habitat and all those things,
Mm-hmm.
And then the supply is the other issue too. Like it's not about people just taking what they need, and so that definitely applies to, I think, all the animals, right? That we have just a small percentage of what we used to have, and yet we have a continuously growing population. And so, in general, in terms of like saving our planet, I could see that, you can just see like you could see it with cows, these massive feed lots that are just that I never want to visit.
Mm-hmm.
Where basically you have like millions of cows in a parking lot, that are, that are an area that can't properly process the manure fast enough, and
Yeah, disgusting, eh?
and then same with fish, farm fish and farmed everything else.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine just what it's going to look like in the future.
I don't think that's a practice that they could keep up farming the fish unless they. I don't know. I know very little about it, but it doesn't seem that safe or sanitary. Like you said, like the manure, like just all gathers up underneath where the fish are being imprisoned.
Yeah. The other thing is so I think they could continue the practice, but I think I heard some like anecdote of like, okay, you've got farmed salmon and you're just feeding them like I think I heard like feathers or just
what
like they're being fed whatever basically and eating it, and if it has calories then they'll consume it. But nutritionally speaking, we're talking about sea life that isn't as nutritious as it once was. It's not collecting the kind of appropriate balance of, I guess, vitamins and minerals to be as nutritious as it once was. And the same thing applies to our soils. So when you take a natural soil and you have like 4 fields and you rotate those fields or move on and come back to that spot later, you'll find that the soil is always going to remain rich.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say, you know what, we're just going to do corn and nothing else, and we're going to do it over and over and over and over in the same spot, and we're going to use more and more water because we're going to use more and more herbicides, that now that where we basically have a type of vegetable, if you will, that can't really withstand the bugs that it once was, where when you have a certain kind of natural mix, it keeps certain certain pests away, but if you just have one, all of a sudden certain pests are going to take over. So so then you've got to use Roundup, and then Roundup is, oh yeah, the other part is that we genetically modify everything so it won't replicate, and then you're not supposed to collect the seeds because it's patented, and then you use Roundup, and you end up with a nightmare is what you end up, but like on a global scale, we're in this nightmare. And so I don't know where it is today. I haven't I try to mostly keep out of these things because
Yeah, it's kind of depressing.
It is depressing, but at the same time, it's a reality. Like this is what we live in. We live in this world where we're eating less and less nutritious foods. That's kind of the point I was making. And so you
And it happens on a fish level too. Like it's not just the humans that are not getting all the nutrients. It's
exactly.
It's our livestock. It's the food being less nutritious as well.
That's right. So that's why I think it's important to, in some healthy way, be angry, and find a way to let out that anger. And so I think that I find myself to be pretty fortunate, so fortunate in having, like the opportunity to do what I do in work, and fortunate in terms of being able to have that tiny ability to go and play music occasionally, and just let
Do you
that
ever
out.
find that these issues like affect your music? Never bleed their way?
Oh yeah, it's a big part of it. So I think it's as much as I call it a selfish release, it's also a release about those topics. So I think if I was to generalize that, the topics usually surround death, love, and politics, and mostly death and politics. And the politics is all of this. So it's basically kind of because it becomes a political thing in terms of how do we interact with the world, and how do we allocate resources and all those things, and those are political activities, how we engage in the economy, how we regulate it, and all of that. So we don't do any of that well, and it's not, my beef is not with the kind of the intentions of the individuals within the system. It's the system itself. It's inertia. You create an institution and then try to change that institution, and it's people's norms within the institution and people on the outside and how they see it are the problem, essentially. That we in general believe that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, but the level of change needed is so monumental. It's like scrapping everything and starting over, really. And that's really hard to do when we've been doing this, for hundreds or thousands of years.
Yeah.
So that's, so all of that really has me angry, but not angry like at this moment, so to speak. It's like I bottle it up and just use it in a way that really drives kind of where the, like at the deepest level possible for myself, just to let it out, let it out in a constructive way, and ideally in a way that's, I say ideally in a way that's likable, but that doesn't really matter to me either. So I'm not really, I respect anybody in terms of their opinion and whether they like something or don't like it, but it is a selfish activity, really. So it's like, I'm very much doing it for myself, and it's also why it's not, we're not out there every, we'll be out in the next year again.
It's not going to be a 2-year gap this time, you're saying?
That's right. Yeah, we're going to try to move to a 1-year gap.
When I first got news of you guys, you're doing it like every 3 months, I think. I'm not sure.
I think so. You know what happened is we, right around that time, I had a child, in 2015. And so, and by then, I guess at least three of us, like one person left the band, and then the three of us all have kids. And so I think that's probably the main reason we, no, you know what? It's not just that. So maybe it's that with me having a child and then working more and trying to find that balance and arranging a show, basically, that I was arranging most of the shows. And so if I don't have time for it, then it's not really happening. So we've kind of resolved now that we want to, we'd like to do an EP of like a second EP that kind of takes our more recent material and just more or less call it a day, like not put any pressure on us ourselves to do anything again together, but as long as we live in the same place, to continue to play occasionally.
Nice.
So
wait, what do you mean call it a day? That sounds like
I don't mean that for myself in terms of I just mean in this configuration, in this particular band, that we don't, because we're barely playing together. So just it would be nice to put at least put an EP together, a second one, and it kind of represents I would say overall it represents a darker place. The music has become a lot nastier overall, I feel. At least the music that I like. But it's about that, that nastier part is more just what I was getting at with the whole, just what's going on with the world, and even if it appears so or not lyrically, because I'll tend to improvise lyrics to a point where sometimes I won't remember what the purpose was of that particular song. So like we have a song called Don't You Know, and the vision is really apocalyptic. It's about kind of being kind of the last, I was kind of envisioning like a Lost kind of scene, where you're going into a bomb shelter and just trying to escape what you can't control, which is that, at a large level, at a high level, things could happen that are out of control, that we either instigate on Earth or that are outside of the Earth's control, that maybe happen to us. But I honestly don't know what the song means outside of that. That's kind of the primary thought, and so I almost have to essentially go back and revisit all the lyrics to really have a conscious. So that's part of the catharsis. I can walk up and we could play that song and I could sing a whole set of lyrics, and I couldn't tell you much more than I just told you about the song until after I've sung it again. And then
you'll have a more solid understanding of what the song is, or
and it might actually follow the same place, but it's almost like I'm not conscious of what I'm singing, even although some of the lyrics are standing lyrics. They sit there almost in this non-linguistic sense. They're part. It's like an Ozzy Osbourne kind of analogy, which is that Ozzy would come up and they would play a song, and Geezer and Tony would have written the song, and Geezer would be in the wings, obviously playing the bass for the song, but then write the lyrics after the fact. But when they're playing it at first, Ozzy would just hum those melodies as to how he was going to sing it, and then Geezer later would hand him all these lyrics, and then he would use those lyrics.
Oh, cool!
And so he was never the songwriter, and nor should he ever become one, in my mind. I think Sharon might have been writing all the lyrics for Ozzy.
Yeah, they've
original.
Got a team. They could afford somebody to come in and write some good music.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that first part is kind of how I almost. So, although there's a general idea there, and I might have even sung the lyrics, I just haven't. Part of that improvising process is that I haven't actually, in many of these songs that kind of, some of which will become like that second EP, I haven't actually even written them out. I just have multiple versions of that song with multiple sets of lyrics that all follow this general idea. And so from there I can almost kind of take a bunch of those and write the final set of lyrics for the song. So it's a laziness, really, and it's almost like also an efficiency of time, that we'd get together and we'd play, and we haven't played for months, and we'd play those songs, and they're without any preparation whatsoever, including where I've had no forethought about those songs. I just know that those are the songs kind of on the list that are kind of our more recent songs that we'll play, but just leaving off from the last time that we played it.
Oops. Like the writing process.
That's the writing process. Yeah. So I haven't written anything on paper. It's just, but we have recordings of those versions, and would listen to the odd recording to remind ourselves what that song sounded like. I enjoy that process. If anything, I would love to have way more time, and then I probably would spend the time writing, because I used to write a lot. And so, but it is one of those efficiencies of time kind of things. Yeah. So what else? Do you play music on this show?
Sometimes, yeah.
So our recent ones that are just that I'm talking about for an EP are they're on SoundCloud or like they're linked to our Facebook page, I think,
Oh,
where
should
we
we?
just posted them, but they're just basement tracks. They're just
Oh yeah.
a version of like I was just saying, we just plop out a version and stick it online so that we're sharing. But I don't know if anybody's listening to them. So
I haven't heard any of the newer tracks. No.
yeah, so they're sitting there, and some of those are not songs that we'll try again. I think that the EP would only be 4 or 5 songs, and so outside of that, there are countless tracks, some of which would, where we might really like it, but we don't really have any intention to go. And so part of that thing about not having written it out, not having totally structured it, also is the case musically. It's not completely arranged in some cases, or there's a big space that becomes the center of the song that isn't arranged, and so that keeps changing.
Is it still just the 3 of you in the band? It's legit.
Neil and
Yourself
myself,
and
yeah,
Neil,
that's right. So with that, we've played something, but with no intention to go back, because that to try to go back to a certain arrangement where we played something once, we just leave it as kind of a one-off track, and so we might even share something, but not ever go back to it. There's a lot of material like that, and a lot of material that hasn't been shared that is just.
Is it good material, or do you think it's like shelfable material?
Well, I kind of shrug my shoulders because I think there's also a certain kind of plagiarizing from yourself part, which ends up being that you have the inertia of playing a bunch of different songs, and then a certain newer song might take elements of those.
Mm-hmm. I find that when I'm listening to Neil Young, I'll hear elements of other songs in future songs, but I guess when you are as prolific as him and releasing as many albums, you can't help but repeat yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, with how many albums he has.
I was surprised that he keeps creating music after having brain cancer. I was like, when I heard that Neil Young is having brain cancer, I was like, no, he's like my hero. And then he just went and had surgery and recovered and just kept
That's
at
amazing.
it.
Amazing and lucky,
Yeah.
It's not, many people don't have that luxury of living through cancer. Well, I call it a luxury, but living is a luxury.
Yeah, that's true. It is quite a bit of suffering, I bet, just to experience that and have to go through everything that's required of you, the chemo.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like I think it becomes, it's a moral struggle for many too, because chemo and radiation therapy are these Western types of like interventions that, in a perfect world, you'd catch the cancer at the very beginning, and you'd have this thoughtful way of being able to completely change your diet and eat the right foods, which would kill the cancer. It would choke off the cancer. Like, I'm trying to remember what that type of angiogenesis, I think it's called, maybe. Just that concept of, like, it's exactly that. They eat certain foods that they actually choke off the cancer.
Right, and it's like cutting out all the sugars and stuff that the cancer feeds off of.
Yeah, and it's all having natural sugars seem to be the, like the primary foods, like berries and all that kind of stuff. Seem to be the best, but for most people, catching it at stage 4, or, like when it's too late, and that's really tough. It's the system is tough. How do people go to their physicians or the medical services and make sure they're focusing on health? It's a half cup empty kind of society, where you go and you have an ailment and you fix the ailment. That really is it's kind of a counterproductive way to be. It's a less efficient way to be providing medicine, or providing medical services rather, to only be focusing when there's a problem. I mean, sure, we live longer, but we live longer with all kinds of pharmaceutical interventions and these types of treatments,
Mm-hmm.
they're amazing inventions, but they still kind of take the world in a way that's, it would be nice to be the other way. Like a naturopath and those kinds of services, which I don't know a lot about, but I know that it's a different path, and it's also not the accepted path. So, you don't have naturopaths, inside the hospital, and you don't have them on every corner, whereas you do with GPs, and specialists. So why is that? Much of that has to do with a couple of different bodies that end up politically supporting the way we do things, and supporting so very much like unions, that we have kind of BC and federal colleges for each type of medicine, but then establishing it in education so that you have medical schools. Incredibly important, but at the same time I think there's still a growth to occur, and it's probably like, if we're still around, if the Earth is still around, like say in 400 years or something, that we'll look back on it and go, wow, we've sure changed since then, but it really is probably a 400-year thing.
That's sad. I wish it'd be a lot more instantaneous, but
yeah,
I mean,
that right now we've changed the system. Well, I will say that the main, like when I look at, so there was a time when I used to like participate on Facebook, and like people would get into a conversation about how to change something, and I feel very much so, and it would happen then too. Like if I'm going to say something, it's going to be like, it's going to provoke some kind of argument, and then you're going to get into an argument, but it becomes this useless kind of back and forth thing, because it's very much like trying to argue by text, In other words, it used to be however many, 144 characters. It's not that anymore, but I wish they would limit it.
Yeah.
But if you have to have 3 exchanges, that's a phone call, or that's a face-to-face meeting, and that seems to bypass so many people these days. And from a like personal and professional standpoint, it just makes more sense to see somebody in person, have a phone call, have some efficiency of communication where you're not misconstruing each other's messages, right? Because you're picking up a certain vibe, which like similar to body language, but you're picking up the wrong vibe because the person didn't mean it that way. Like all those things are possible when you're only writing a sentence. But anyways, back to my point. I mean, when I read some of this stuff, like how to change the world, I think I saw like some Woody Harrelson meme that said something about like, you can't change the institutions or something. Or how do we change the institutions? Like and the word wasn't institutions. It was just about the system or something.
Yeah.
And then you have a bunch of answers, which are like answering the how, but most people are really not answering the how. Like they're just kind of providing like one snippet, or they're providing an opinion about that pathway, but they're not pointing down the road and saying that's the direction. They're just saying, it's easy. You just put a signpost at this point on the road, and then that leads them in that direction. Done. But how about if they're not driving a car and the road is 1,000,000 miles long, I just, like in general, I just feel totally defeated when I see that kind of conversation, because it's not about changing the world. It's about thinking you change the world while you're sitting on your couch and you just type one sentence. So my point is, I just don't, when you live in a middle-class society, and even when you're not, however you define middle class, you're not suffering, you can put food on the table, you're somewhere in that range, you're not really suffering, and you don't care enough, you're not affected enough that you'd be willing to just go out there and die for it, That's not the problem, but that's the reality, is that, in those countries where you end up seeing, those countries or the communities even, where you see people who are willing to stand on the line, you can see it, that they'll do anything for their cause, for the right reasons, for their community, for their family. But in many respects, we have this society where we think that somebody else is going to go change the system and do it all. So it's going to take quite a bit more suffering and quite a few more, I think, catastrophes, like real catastrophes, to kind of bring more of a mobilization of change. And I don't even know what parts, right? Because, I mean, you can kind of look at the Occupy movement from however many years ago and go, everybody coming together serves a great purpose. But is it a coordinated, beyond an occupation, is it a coordinated effort for specific things? And that's the part that I have difficulty understanding, because if you have all these different things, well, what's at the top of the list? And who's going to decide that? How many of the people from that mobilization are going to go in that certain direction? I have no clue, but I don't think
there was any of that in the Occupy movement. It's just like they showed up and it's just like, now what? Camping.
So I think it's, and it's one of those criticisms of that kind of movement. So if enough people can put their, hearts and minds and bodies in front of certain causes, then change happens, But it's really tough. It's really tough to predict that and to imagine that mobilization and be part of a particular one or more, And so that's where I think the more local, the better. I mean, really.
Yeah.
But really, if something's affecting all of us, can we mobilize in a way where we're mobilizing all communities? I don't know the answer to that. And in many respects, I probably seem like I'm apathetic, But I mean, I do feel that I focus on the way I know how, which just ends up being like through work and through, and perhaps through, if I was saying something that was somehow meaningful to anybody else, that hopefully then somebody might listen to that song or whatever. But that doesn't, I don't really see it in that way. It's a dual-edged sword. Like, do you want to sell albums and become famous, or do you want a message to get out there? I'd much rather a message get out there, but by pushing, you're pushing the prior, which is just a marketing exercise and a selfish kind of act that relates to a system that just shouldn't have existed to begin with.
Kind of defeating before you even start, eh?
Yeah, exactly. That's my happy thought of the day.
I guess we could wrap this up. That was a pretty good podcast. I don't know where else we could take this. I bet we could just talk forever, though, too. Thanks. But then you're just going to bore people.
Yeah, it depends what you stick in the middle of that conversation. There's, I don't know what. You could listen to those songs, but you could play. There's a song called Blood and Darkness that we have. It's a happy song. But
happy.
You can stick that in the middle of the conversation. It has a certain nastiness that I really enjoy. It's just dark, really. Nice. But I used to remember talking to people that would say, like, why do you like metal? And they couldn't understand it. And they said that, like, the music, heavy music would actually make them angry. And for me, it's always been the opposite. It's like an exorcism, it's basically like relieving everything that could possibly be negative in one's life. So when you're listening to a heavy music, there's a certain catharsis, it's just a release. And I think it goes beyond metal specifically. Like, it's the whole, by now you and I share a lot of joy of the 70s, there's so much great music that came out. So it's that too. There's a whole joy with it, but when it's heavy, even more so, just that energy is there, and you just feel, I could just be smiling. I'd be listening to the nastiest, darkest, even like satanic type music, in terms of like an outsider's perception of it, and just be smiling through that because it's just like a joy that comes from it somehow. Just because it really is about, it's about your health in many respects. And I think, if anything, I was talking to my partner about this, I think yesterday, just that, a positive thing that I can draw from like European society today would be that I will like automatically excuse like there's a certain diversity. Some countries have developed more diversity than others, and that's what I hope for every country of the world, so that we, are basically providing people access where people can move to anywhere they want and be able to live a healthy life. I hope that's where we're going as a world. But anyways, that aside, there are many countries in Europe where, for example, listening to metal or being in a band or anything like that is not really something that's considered to be an underground activity. It's always been pretty normal. Like, in other words, you see a lot of people that will listen to heavy music, and it's not ostracized or demonized.
Is it like mainstream?
It's much more mainstream. Much more mainstream. So I think a much larger proportion of the population doesn't think that's a big deal. Whereas here, I think what happens is once you get a job, once you have a certain life, then you're expected to follow certain norms, and those norms end up kind of being it's very much a keeping up appearances kind of thing. And that's something I don't like about our society. That's something that's kind of that to me is a colonizing kind of attribute or virtue of a colonizing nation, and I don't like that at all. When really it should just be acceptance. We should just accept all people for what they are, what they want to be doing, how they want to appear, and not be judging each other.
Yeah, that's what happened when I was working at CKPG. Is just like they weren't very happy with the things I was posting online, and they didn't really give me a warning or anything. It was just kind of like, oh, you failed at that.
Right. Yeah, I think you just, ideally you're able to, what I'd want for you in that respect, that you're able to somehow reconcile it directly, like have some kind of, an exit interview, more or less, would be that's a tool that's used often. In other words, you don't want to let anybody go without understanding their perspective and what they think might have gone wrong. And that's an opportunity for both parties to reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
But it does require kind of questioning and determining, do they have interest in that? I think you have interest in that, and it would be some level of closure.
For sure, yeah. But I don't think they have any interest in that, no.
But you don't, yeah, with most things, it's just important to be explicit around those things. I can't say much about Facebook and legalities associated with Facebook, because it's one of those things where if you don't have your privacy settings set high, then and you have it so that anybody can see on your wall, for example, then now you've set it publicly, versus clicking on the little privacy setting and making it so that people can't see what you're posting, who aren't your friends directly. That distinction is probably a big one, and I don't know if it relates to your case, but
yeah, it does, yeah. No, my Facebook profile is completely open. There's no privacy settings on it whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, I don't. Well, I hope you find some, in terms of your livelihood and what you're doing next.
Yeah.
Find things to do that are meaningful and along the lines of both what you're capable to do and where your skill sets are, and that you like doing it. Those are all important.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Let's wrap this up.
Okay.
Airfreight Podcast, Take 22. Christos Vardacostas.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.